Today, we're diving into a really unusual story that came out of Nigeria back in December 2020. We're looking at a news report from Nation.Africa, and it's attributed to AFP about the arrest of an 18-year-old in Lagos. Her name was Ujunwa Ofia.
And what's immediately striking about this case really is the accusation itself.
Right.
This young woman, she was arrested for allegedly conspiring with her boyfriend to actually stage her own kidnapping.
Faking it.
Yeah, faking it and then demanding a pretty significant ransom from her family.
Exactly. We're talking about a demand for 30 million naira.
Which is a lot.
Yeah, to give some perspective, back in December 2020, that was a substantial amount of money, roughly, 79,000 US dollars, something like that.
Yeah, around 65,500 euros. It's not pocket change.
Oh, definitely not. And it's just not the kind of story you hear every day, is it? Someone allegedly masterminding their own abduction, especially with, such a large sum involved initially. Okay, so let's unpack the details. What did the news report actually tell us about how this alleged conspiracy was supposed to have worked?
Well, the report indicates that Ujunwa Ofia allegedly collaborated closely with her boyfriend. He was identified as an Uber driver.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that at the time the article was published, he was reportedly still at large.
Ah, so he wasn't caught immediately.
No, exactly. The authorities were actively seeking him out, and he was described as being at the center of this case. It really paints a picture of him potentially being the key figure in orchestrating the whole thing.
So it sounds like he might have been the alleged mastermind behind it.
That seems to be the implication, yeah.
And what about the actual attempt to, get the ransom money? How did the police get involved and end up making the arrests?
Well, the news report details that Ofia, along with another individual, a 22-year-old named Precious Chukwu, they were apprehended right when the ransom money was being handed over.
Oh, wow. So during the drop.
Exactly. Which suggests that law enforcement probably received a tip-off or were already, conducting a close investigation.
Makes sense.
And the state police commissioner, Hakeem Odumosu, he actually publicly confirmed the arrests and the nature of the case. He stated it was a case of conspiracy and staged kidnapping.
That's pretty definitive language from a police commissioner.
Oh, absolutely. It leaves very little room for doubt about their initial assessment of what happened,
Yeah, it certainly sounds like a pretty open and shut case from their perspective, at least initially. Now, we mentioned that huge initial ransom demand, 30 million Namara, but the report also says that the final amount wasn't actually that high?
That's correct. The article mentions that there were negotiations. It seems the initial 30 million demand was reportedly reduced quite significantly.
How much did it come down to?
Down to 700,000 naira.
Wow, okay. That's a huge drop.
It really is. Now, that's still, considerable sum, around 8,850 US dollars at the time, but it's a far, far cry from the original figure.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the strategy. Do they genuinely think they could get 30 million, or was that always just a high starting point for negotiation?
It's a good question.
It's hard to know for sure just from the article, but it definitely highlights that dynamic of negotiation you might actually expect in a real kidnapping scenario.
That's a really interesting point. The negotiation almost adds this weird layer of realism to the alleged fake kidnapping.
Yeah, it's strange.
It makes you think about the mindset involved, Was this just a desperate gamble? Did they know they wouldn't get the full 30 million? Or was there actually a more thought out plan to just settle for a smaller amount all along? It raises questions about the planning and the motives here.
Indeed. Now that we've looked at the specifics, the alleged conspiracy, the ransom talks,
Yeah.
it's really crucial to understand the broader context.
Where this was happening.
Exactly. The article points out that, unfortunately, kidnapping for ransom is, fairly common in southern Nigeria.
So this wasn't happening in a vacuum.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It gives a sense that this alleged incident, while definitely weird in its nature, is taking place within a region where kidnapping is a very real and present danger.
Yeah, the article even gives some examples of who the typical targets have been in real cases.
It does. The report specifically mentions oil workers and prominent Nigerians. Even relatives of sports stars have been targeted for abduction in the past.
That paints a concerning picture, doesn't it? A region where kidnapping is a serious issue for certain groups.
Definitely.
And what's also important, I think, is what the article says about the typical outcome in these real kidnapping cases. What usually happens after someone's abducted for ransom there, according to the report.
Typically, the article states that victims are usually released unharmed once the ransom payment is made. And that's a crucial piece of information, right? Because it highlights what the family of Ujunwa Ofia might have been expecting, the fear they would have felt, even if this whole thing turned out to be a hoax.
Absolutely. The emotional impact on them would have been very real from the start, regardless.
No doubt.
It's hard to imagine receiving that kind of demand, genuine or not. Interestingly, this alleged incident wasn't entirely unique, was it? At least according to the information in the article.
No, you're right. It makes reference to a similar case that happened just a few months before this one.
What was that about?
Well, you might find this particularly noteworthy. It mentions a 17-year-old girl in Ogun State, which is nearby, who also allegedly faked her own kidnap to demand ransom, this time from her mother.
Wow, so it had happened before or something very similar.
It suggests that this type of scheme, while still unusual, might not be a totally isolated thing within Nigeria at that time. It certainly makes you wonder if there might be some underlying, maybe social or economic factors contributing to people feeling they have to resort to such extreme measures.
Like desperation.
Possibly. Is it a sign of increasing desperation, or perhaps of some kind of disturbing trend emerging? It's hard to say.
It definitely makes you think about the potential desperation driving these kinds of actions. You know, the lure of a big payout, however misguided or risky the plan is, could be a powerful motivator.
For sure.
Finally, the article just briefly touches on the legal side of things. Given that the police commissioner used the term conspiracy, what can we sort of infer about the potential legal trouble for those involved?
Well, the commissioner's use of conspiracy is definitely significant, legally speaking.
Okay.
In many legal systems, and presumably in Nigeria too, conspiracy to commit a crime is a serious offense in its own right.
Right, even if the main crime didn't fully happen.
Yes, exactly. So even if the actual kidnapping didn't technically take place as a real abduction, the act of planning and agreeing to carry out a criminal act like extortion through deception that would likely carry substantial legal consequences for Ujunwa Ofia and her alleged accomplice if it's proven in court.
So potentially serious penalties.
Could be, yeah, depending on the specific laws and how seriously they treat offenses like that.
Okay, so let's just bring it all together for everyone listening. We've dug into this news report about 18-year-old Ujunwa Ofia and her boyfriend accused of plotting this, well, pretty elaborate fake kidnapping. With that huge initial 30 million naira ransom demand. We saw how that amount was reportedly negotiated way down
To 700,000 naira.
Right, and then the arrest of Ofia and Precious Chukwu during the alleged ransom drop while the boyfriend was apparently still missing.
Still large, yeah.
We also got that important context understanding that real kidnapping for ransom is sadly a reality in southern Nigeria.
And that there was that similar reported incident just a few months prior involving another young girl.
Right. And finally, we touched on those likely serious legal implications of a conspiracy charge in a case like this.
And reflecting on all this, I mean, what really stands out is just the sheer audacity and, potential desperation behind such an alleged act.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the mindset of someone who would reportedly go to such lengths, deceiving their own family, involving the police like this.
Especially, as you said, within a context where real kidnappings are a genuine dangerous threat. It adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it?
It really does.
Absolutely. It leaves you pondering the underlying reasons, the pressures that might lead individuals to consider and allegedly, execute such drastic and potentially damaging schemes. It really prompts a significant question, I think. What does it truly suggest about the circumstances someone might be facing, or maybe the choices they feel they have when they resort to such extreme...
That's a heavy thought.
It is, and it's certainly something to consider long after our deep dive today.